We're all excited for Christmas. It's December next month, hence the hats. So we are recording this just prior to the December month where everyone will be wearing these hats to Christmas parties and such like. On today's video, we're going to be talking though about Jeremy Hunt's autumn statement that was held in Parliament on the 22nd of November. And he made some announcements which do affect us property people. So we're going to be going into the summary of what's been going on there. So welcome to Property Insight. My name is Mark Ashworth.
And I'm Neil Harding.
So let's kick this off. What did Jeremy Hunt have to say for himself on the autumn statement? Anything exciting?
There were a few things that are relevant to the world of property and property investing. There's a lot that wasn't said, which was expected around things like inheritance tax and capital gains tax. All those things weren't changed, but there were some things in there relevant to property. So one of the things was the local housing allowance is going to change. It's going up. So, yes.
There's been a big problem, hasn't there, with people who are basically on some kind of level of housing benefit where they get into a stage where rents have gone up some crazy percentage in the last year or two. I think it's something in the region of 30%, or in some areas probably more than that.
Yep.
And there's not enough money in the housing benefit to cover the rents. And particularly if people are moving property, let's say, if they're coming from a rent that maybe they were paying a lower amount and then having to move into a newer property where the rents have been revised, just no chance of being able to meet those the affordability really on it.
Yeah, very difficult. So, and the LHA rate, as it's called, that's been frozen for over 3 years. So this was well overdue. Like you say, rents have increased by a lot over the last few years. So the increase is going to include the cheapest, so it's going to be anchored to the cheapest 30% of rents in the local area.
I think that makes sense. Let's break that down again.
Yeah.
So it's basically if you've got a whole load of properties and you've got the cheapest one being at 0% and the most expensive one being at 100%, it's the first 30% of those property values that will increase, or
that's what the price is going to be set at.
Yeah. Okay, got you. So basically, if you're a landlord that is, renting to people on social benefits or in any kind of social housing, you'll directly be affected by that.
Yeah,
in a positive way.
I think it's a good thing. I've got some tenants that are on housing benefit, and the rents are well below market rate. And I think for investors and for tenants alike, it's hard to make those sorts of tenancies viable in a private rental sector. So yeah, I think it's a good thing for both tenants and landlords. Another change is in the planning. So there's going to be permitted development rights made available to convert houses into flats, or a house, for example, into 2 flats.
So this is quite interesting. I think this is going to be really popular for people who are in higher value areas. So let's take London, for example, where you may have a property that could easily be split into 2, and the values of those properties could be, maybe, if not the same, more than individually than the cost that you purchase it at. So let's say it needs a refurbishment, and you've got enough room to convert that into 2 2-bedroom flats. Then there's definitely going to be scope to make some money there in terms of profitability. I don't really think it's going to work in higher yielding, low value areas, because the actual cost of the works just probably isn't going to make that viable. So I think what they're trying to do is to increase the number of dwellings, so they've got more units available to rent. Because let's say a lot of people that might rent a 2 or 3 bedroom house still could only be maybe 1 or 2 people. It could be a single person or it could be a couple. But if they could equally fit into a high spec flat, for example, then if you've got 2 flats, you've got an extra dwelling there out of 1, haven't you? So I think they're just trying to make it easier to increase the number of rental units, or number of units in general, not necessarily rental. It can be for sale too. And I think that that will be a welcome change. But I really, places like Cambridge, Oxford, places like Brighton, basically expensive areas, I think it will work best in. But yeah, the lower value stuff, I can't really see that working in terms of its cost of conversion.
There's a 75% business rates discount for retail, hospitality and leisure firms in England, extended for another year.
So hospitality, I guess you're talking SA units here, Neil.
So yeah, thinking here is that this could well be relevant for any service accommodation operators that are watching. So I don't do service accommodation, Mark, you don't either, but obviously we know lots of people do. So a 75% discount on business rates is worth having, isn't it?
But I guess you probably have to have, the property would have to be as a serviced accommodation unit in terms of the house type, right? So if it was a normal C3 dwelling that you were just renting on Airbnb, for example, casually, then that wouldn't count because you'd still be paying council tax. So it'd be for those units that are specifically registered as FHLs, as they call them, furnished holiday let.
Yeah, good point. And that's most of the specific news for property. More widely, there's been some other news around economic stability and growth and also tax cuts. There's been quite a bit in the autumn statement about tax cuts. The employee national insurance contributions will be decreasing from 12% to 10% starting from January 24. The self-employed Class 2 NICs and so they'll be abolished, and also there's a reduction in Class 4 NIC contributions from 9% to 8% from April 24, and the national living wage will increase from £10.42 to £11.44. It'll be relevant for 21 and 22, or applicable I should say, for 21 and 22 year olds, not just 23 year olds. I think that's great and well overdue.
Yeah, good news all around there.
Yeah. And then on the economy generally, so there's some news about the government being committed to reduce debt, be keeping public sector borrowing below 3% of GDP. And also the Independent Office for Budget Responsibility, or the OBR, expects the economy to grow by 0.6% this year and 0.7% next year, rising to 1.4% in 2025, 1.9% in 2026, and 2% in 2027. It forecasts that inflation will fall to 2.8% by the end of 2024. I mean, that seems a little bit optimistic at the moment. We're in the world of 5%, I think, but and then falling to 2%, which is the long-term target for Bank of England by 2025. So let's wait and see. I still find that quite hard to believe.
I think I'm just going to add one thing in quickly because I did listen. I'm a big lover of listening to Martin Lewis, who covers a lot of this sort of consumer stuff. And he was talking about, in particular, the inflationary rate and where it sits and that it's dropped and everything else. But the interesting thing that he talked about was this time last year, the government introduced this scheme whereby the energy companies would pay you back some money every single month for 4 months. So it was a £400 bonus that was given from the government. If you remember, it was £66 or £67 per month back on their energy costs. But that they haven't factored that in with inflation. And obviously when they're factoring in levels of inflation, they always factor in energy costs because that's a big thing that obviously people have to pay for. It's one of those things that everybody needs and it's factored into the inflationary cost. But that hasn't actually been factored in. So this Christmas and this winter, we're all going to be paying more than we were paying last year for energy. But that amount of money that we saved and the amount of money that it's going to cost us this year isn't factored into the inflation level.
I did not know that.
There you go.
That's an interesting point.
Let's say they've been, those figures a little bit been massaged a little bit.
Yeah, they've been choosy, selective. Yeah.
But hey, I think we're all feeling the cost of living, and I think that probably most of you will agree that it certainly feels like more than the percentages that they talk about on the official figures, and that will probably depend on a lot of things like the sort of lifestyle you have, where you're saving, where you're not saving, where you're spending, where you're not spending, the area that you're in, how many kids you've got, all that sort of stuff is all relevant to how much you're feeling the pinch, let's say. I think that just about wraps up the info on the announcements from Wednesday. So we do find, or hope rather, that you found that insightful. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. And happy Christmas.
Happy Christmas.